The 5 most spectacular heists in Europe. Can you imagine a heist where the thieves escape in a helicopter and the police can't take off because someone planted bombs under their choppers? Or criminals disguised as women carrying off jewelry worth a fortune without firing a single shot? Today I'll tell you about 10 of the most daring robberies in Europe, from ingenious to brazen. And the last one changed the course of history. Let's begin. They vanished, stealing loot worth 100 million. Let's begin with something the press called the heist of the century. Imagine this: 2 floors underground, a heavily protected vault, believed to be impossible to crack, with 10 layers of security. We're talking about the vault in the Antwerp Diamond Center, guarded by infrared detectors, seismic sensors, a Doppler radar, a magnetic field, and a lock with 100 million possible combinations, all under the eye of 24-hour surveillance with dozens of cameras. Meanwhile, in the background, an intricate plan unfolds. The Italian thief Leonardo Bartolo enters the game posing as a diamond merchant. He rents an office inside the Diamond Center and over 18 months learns every corner of the place, studying the security systems and observing the guards' routines. He is supported by a group known as the School of Turin, specialists in codes, locks, alarms, and camouflage. One member installs a miniature hidden camera inside a lamp directly above the vault, recording every move the guard makes when opening it. The footage is transmitted to a concealed transmitter hidden inside a fireproof extinguisher case. The day before the heist, Bartolo has a brilliant idea. During one of his visits, he sprays the heat and motion sensors with hairspray. The protective layer dampens the sensor's reactions to his presence. That night, the team returns. Using a duplicated key, they unlock the door, and with an aluminum plate, they sustain the magnetic field between the plates. The alarm system doesn't trigger, even as the door opens. Light sensors are covered with tape, and the power supply is briefly cut off. Inside the vault, a scene straight out of a movie. Hundreds of safe deposit boxes full of cash, jewelry, and diamonds. Much of the loot was too heavy to carry, so they left some behind on the floor. At least 109 boxes were robbed, with the stolen goods valued at over $100 million. When the authorities arrived in the morning, they were in shock. Despite an intensive search, the treasures were never recovered. But one stupid mistake prevented a Hollywood ending. Speedy, one of the crew members, tossed out a bag filled with documents, food scraps, and evidence from the heist in a nearby forest. The bag ended up in the hands of a secretly cleanliness-obsessed local farmer who reported everything to the police. Inside were receipts, Bartolo's DNA, and other incriminating evidence. It was enough to have him arrested. Bartolo was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The others got 5 years each. Only one member of the crew was never caught. And the treasures? They were never found either. Old men robbed a vault straight out of a movie. Easter weekend, 2015. While London celebrated and the Hatton Garden District, the heart of Britain's jewelry world, was nearly deserted, a group of old men prepared for a heist that would go down in history. They weren't youngsters with guns in their hands. Quite the opposite. All of them were elderly, some in their 70s with gray hair and dentures. Retired burglars for whom this last job was meant to be a farewell to the past and the crowning of their careers. Or maybe just a way to retire in style. Their target was the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Vault, seemingly impenetrable. Located in a basement behind armored doors, secured with a modern alarm system and holding over 70 private deposit boxes filled with valuables, gold, and jewelry. A long-prepared, meticulous, and flawlessly executed plan. They began by disabling the elevator and lowering themselves down the shaft. They squeezed through a narrow gap between walls and broke through thick barriers. They disabled the alarm and, using an industrial Hilti drill, spent hours boring through concrete. One by one, they opened the boxes. The loot they carried off is estimated at as much as $300 million. It was one of the largest robberies in British history, but as with all perfect plans, something always goes wrong. They didn't know that new security cameras had been installed in the stairwell. The cameras recorded their faces, their movements, and their conversations. Police quickly tracked them down. Some were caught literally in tracksuits as investigators searched apartments stuffed with cash, gold and jewelry in plastic shopping bags. Yet to this day, a significant part of the loot has never been recovered. Some gang members claim that the rest of the money went to a mysterious investor who had financed the job, a name they refused to reveal, even under the threat of prison. The Hatton Garden heist went on to inspire many films and books, not just because it was audacious, but because the entire operation was carried out by a group of men who, according to police jargon, should have been sitting at home with tea, not drilling holes into a vault. You thought that heist was bold? Wait until you hear about the next one, involving a helicopter and explosives. Helicopter, bombs, and a police blockade. The heist of the century in broad daylight. This was a heist straight out of an action movie. Stockholm, a helicopter slowly approaches the roof of the G4S security company's cash depot. Not police, not military. A machine hijacked by thieves, ready for one of the boldest operations in Scandinavian history. September 23, 2009, 5:15 a.m. A Bell 206 Jet Ranger hovers above the building. On board, several masked perpetrators. These weren't random robbers. The plan had been prepared down to the tiniest detail. One smashes a window with a hammer, another sets explosives, a third secures the entrance. When the doors burst open from the blast, they rush inside and start loading bags of cash. At the same time, police receive the alarm, but they can't move. Why? Because right by the police hangar, someone had planted fake bombs. The helicopters couldn't take off. Access roads were also blocked. Spiked strips, fake mines, all to buy time. And it worked. The whole operation lasted less than 20 minutes. At 5:35, the helicopter carrying the money disappeared from radar and flew north. It was abandoned a few dozen kilometers away in a forest. The thieves switched to previously prepared cars. No one at the depot was hurt. Employees remained locked in a secure room. G4S refused to reveal the losses, but the media speculated the loot might have reached tens of millions of dollars. Sounds like a movie, even better, because it turned out the Swedish police actually knew about a possible robbery. They had an informant, but the criminals, like in a good thriller, changed the date of the operation literally at the last moment. In the following days, some of the culprits were arrested. The mastermind was Goran Bojovic, a man with international connections. The pilot, Alexander Eriksson, was a professional familiar with the route and skilled at maneuvering between buildings. Sentences? From 5 to 8 years in prison. Part of the money has never been found. G4S offered a reward of 7 million kroner for help in capturing the perpetrators. But even with the arrest, this heist went down in history as an example of perfect planning, cold-blooded execution, and boldness rated 10 out of 10. After all, how many thieves do you know who can fly a helicopter, handle explosives, and wage psychological warfare against the police? This wasn't just any robbery. This was a heist that truly deserves its own movie. They disguised themselves as women. They carried off jewelry worth millions. It was supposed to be an ordinary late morning at the luxurious Harry Winston jewelry boutique in the very heart of Paris. As on any other day, the staff opened the doors for wealthy clients who came to view pieces worth a fortune. No one expected that in a moment this peaceful day would turn into one of the most spectacular heists. Several men entered the store. Some of them were disguised as women, wearing wigs, makeup, and elegant clothing. The security guards did not react, because at first glance they looked like regular customers. But the situation changed quickly. Guns came out, there were shouts and orders. The thieves knew exactly where the most valuable pieces were located. One of the attackers addressed the employees by name, and that could mean only one thing. Someone on the inside must have given them detailed information. Within just a few minutes, watches, necklaces, rings disappeared. Everything worth about 116 million euros in total. It was one of the biggest jewelry thefts in the history of France. The perpetrators were suspected of ties to the international Pink Panthers gang, known for meticulously planned, almost cinematic robberies of jewelers and galleries in some of the most heavily guarded places in the world. Investigators immediately launched an inquiry, but the Pink Panthers were no novices. They erase traces, move across countries, use false identities, and operate with surgical precision. Despite intensive searches by the French police, Most of the loot was never recovered. Officially, several suspects were detained in the case, but proving their involvement turned out to be extremely difficult. It was one of those robberies that to this day inspires awe and the frustration of law enforcement. A robbery with a kidnapping. This was not an ordinary bank heist, the largest cash robbery in the history of the United Kingdom. On the night of February 21st to 22nd, 2006, a group of criminals, posing as police officers, kidnapped the vault manager, Colin Dixon, along with his wife and 8-year-old son. A few dozen minutes later, the family was forced to open the deposit doors, where the remaining 14 employees were tied up and held. £53 million was stolen, while another £153 million was left behind because it no longer fit into the vehicle. The robbery was organized with precision: fake police cars, suits, masks, and also an insider within the depository who granted them access, misleading the staff. It ended with the abduction of an employee, resembling a tiger kidnapping, a brutal but very carefully thought-out attack. Hundreds of police officers were involved in the investigation. A £2 million reward was offered for information. During raids, part of the loot was recovered. £9 million was found in a city workshop, £1.3 million in a parked van, and £8 million in a garage. Between 2007 and 2008, the ongoing trials at the Old Bailey ended with convictions of the main gang members. But a significant part of the money was never found. It is estimated that about £32 million disappeared without a trace, possibly having ended up in financial havens such as Dubai, Morocco, or Northern Cyprus. In 2019, 8 years after the verdict, Paul Allen, one of the attackers, was shot in his luxury home. The assailants intended to kill him. Allen survived, but was left paralyzed for the rest of his life. The case was described as another dark chapter of this drama. From a brutal kidnapping, we move on to one of the most elegant heists at a museum full of royal jewels. The heist of the royal jewels, they did it in 5 minutes. In November 2019, one of the most audacious heists in modern German history took place. The thieves' target was the Green Vault, one of the oldest and richest museums in Europe, located in the Royal Palace in Dresden. Priceless 18th century jewels were stolen, valued, according to estimates, at over 113 million euros, though some media even spoke of $1 billion. The thieves struck before dawn. First, they set fire to an electrical box near the museum, cutting off power and disabling the alarm system. Then they cut through metal bars and entered the building. They moved swiftly, like in an action movie. They located the room with the jewels and smashed the armored display case with an axe. The whole operation lasted just a few minutes. After that, they vanished without a trace. The loot included, among other things, a diamond-studded ceremonial sword, brooches, buttons, and epaulets decorated with thousands of precious stones. Everything once belonged to the Saxon royal family and had a historical value that was impossible to estimate. Suspicion quickly fell on members of the Remo Arab clan from Berlin, previously involved in the theft of a 100-kilogram gold coin from the Bode Museum. After a series of police raids, several suspects were arrested, and in 2023, 5 men were sentenced to between 4 and 6 years in prison. Some of them confessed and returned a significant part of the loot in exchange for lighter sentences. In 2022, part of the stolen jewels was found in Berlin, damaged but still recognizable. Still missing, however, is one of the most valuable ornaments, the epaulette with a 50-carat diamond. This heist was not only a spectacular robbery, but also a painful lesson for German cultural heritage. Saxony has invested millions of euros in additional security, hoping that a second such heist will not succeed. They pretended to be security guards. They stole millions, and the police didn't even have time to react. At Amsterdam Airport, the morning calm prevailed. Cargo terminal workers were preparing to load diamonds that were to be placed on board a plane bound for Antwerp, the world capital of the precious stone trade. No one suspected that in a moment one of the most daring robberies in the history of the Netherlands would take place. Suddenly, a vehicle drove into the warehouse area. Armed men dressed in KLM airline staff uniforms got out. As with previous heists, the whole operation lasted only a few minutes. The attackers quickly overpowered the crew at gunpoint. The workers were forced to lie on the ground while the robbers seized the valuable shipment, crates full of uncut diamonds. The estimated value of the loot was around 75 million euros. Although the perpetrators were not caught in the first hours, the investigation moved into full gear. It was quickly established that the thieves must have had inside information. They knew the exact schedule, procedures, and security measures. The trail led to a KLM employee who turned out to be the mole he had helped the criminal group organize the heist. In May 2019, after a long trial, the court in Haarlem sentenced 4 men. The harshest sentence, 7 years in prison, was given to the presumed leader of the group. 3 of his accomplices were imprisoned for between 3 and 6 years, and the KLM employee, who enabled the robbery from the inside, was sentenced to 5 years. Although part of the loot was recovered, from the getaway car, diamonds worth about 35 to 40 million euros were secured. The rest vanished without a trace. The missing stones were never found, nor was it determined where and how they might have been liquidated. For years, the main organizer remained elusive. That is until 2024, when Dutch police, in cooperation with Spanish authorities, arrested him in Ibiza. He still had more than 6 years of his sentence left to serve. His arrest closed one of the most high-profile chapters in the history of organized crime in the Netherlands. To this day, it is unknown who was responsible for the disappearance of the missing diamonds and whether the rest of the gang continued operating in the shadows, living off the fortune gained in just a few minutes. 3 minutes, 0 shots, loot worth millions of euros. Just like in the case of the Amsterdam heist, an organized group drove onto the Brussels airport runway in 2 black vehicles with flashing blue lights and fitted with police markings. The masked and armed attackers demonstrated surgical precision. They drove through a hole in the fence directly onto the ramp, where a shipment of diamonds was being loaded. 8 armed men, carrying machine guns resembling Kalashnikovs, intimidated the crew and staff. But surprisingly, not a single shot was fired, and the passengers didn't even realize that a robbery had taken place. Between 120 and 130 packets of diamonds were stolen, with an estimated value of around 37 million euros. The entire operation lasted only 5 minutes. After the heist, the perpetrators withdrew the same way they had entered and disappeared before anyone could react. One of the vehicles used was later found burned. The investigation led to the arrest of 31 people in 2013, but in 2018, the court acquitted 18 suspects due to insufficient evidence. In June 2019, French businessman Marc Bertoldi was sentenced to 5 years in prison and a fine, although the court did not consider his role to be strictly that of a leader. In March 2023, the remaining 4 suspects were also acquitted. The court ruled that the evidence was too inconclusive and did not clearly establish guilt. To this day, only a small portion of the loot has been recovered. From the airport tarmac, we move into the past, to the legendary heist that became a cornerstone of British pop culture. They stopped a train full of money. The plan was perfect, until it wasn't. It is 1963, England, the middle of the night. On the route between Glasgow and London, a Royal Mail postal train comes to a halt. Everything seems routine, but moments later an action begins that went down in history as the heist of the century. A group of 15 men, thoroughly prepared, swap out the light signals along the track, forcing the driver to stop the train. Within minutes, they storm into the carriages and carry off bags of money. More than 2.5 million pounds. Today, that would be about 50 million. Not a single shot, no victims. An operation so precise that the police couldn't believe for a long time it wasn't the work of the Secret Services. Among the perpetrators was Ronnie Biggs, a figure who quickly became the symbol of the story. He was caught and sentenced to 30 years in prison, but he had no intention of spending his life behind bars. After just a few months, he escaped from a London prison, over the wall, down a rope, into a waiting van. From that moment on, his second life began, the life of a fugitive. First plastic surgery in France, then Australia, and finally Brazil. In Rio de Janeiro, Biggs settled for good. He had a child with a Brazilian woman, which granted him protection from extradition. For years, he lived almost openly, selling t-shirts with his own image, appearing in interviews, recording an album with punk musicians. He literally profited from his own legend. The British authorities tried many times to bring him back, but in vain. Brazilian law was on his side, and Ronnie, though a wanted man, became a media star and a hero of urban legends. Until one day, in 2001, after several decades of freedom, he returned to England on his own. Officially, for health reasons, though some say he simply wanted to die in his homeland. He was imprisoned again, but due to poor health, he was released after a few years. He died in 2013 at the age of 84. But all of that is nothing compared to what happened more than 100 years ago. A heist that financed a revolution and changed history. The heist that changed the course of history. And finally, as we go back even further, Tbilisi, 1907. In Tsarist Russia, unrest is boiling, and the Bolsheviks are searching not only for ideas, but also for money. A plan emerges to organize an armed robbery of a bank convoy. Among the organizers, a certain Kamo, a close associate of Lenin himself, described today more as a revolutionary, but back then, without a shadow of doubt, a terrorist. In broad daylight, in the central square of Tbilisi, hell breaks loose. Grenades, gunfire, screams. More than 40 people are killed. Soldiers, guards, but also random passersby. And all of it just to seize 241,000 rubles, an astronomical sum for those times. Today, that would equal several $1,000,000. This money would later be used to finance Bolshevik activities, including Lenin himself while in exile. And although today we look at this story through the prism of politics and revolutions, one must not forget, it was a brutal, bloody crime, one that changed the course of history, because sometimes a single chest of money taken by force can trigger an avalanche that no one can stop. Each of these heists is proof that reality can be more shocking than cinema. Let me know in the comments which one impressed you the most, and if you want more stories like these, hit subscribe and give a thumbs up. See you in the next episode.